Welcome back to the jury. While Labor's lead in the latest news poll has narrowed 51 to 49 with support for the party slipping, the coalition gaining a point to 37%. But there's no joy for Peter Dutton. If it was a federal election vote, he would fail to form government. Those results should give both major parties cause to reflect on their diminishing appeal to voters. Aussies are seemingly turning away from the major party duopolies, with 31% of voters nominating a party other than the majors. The trend mirrors the result of Tasmania's election, where Liberal and Labor failed to form a majority government last week. Our next question for the jury: are voters turning their backs on the major political parties? Joining us is Tania Mihailuk, New South Wales One Nation Leader, and Bronwyn Bishop, former House Speaker. Thank you to both of you. Good evening. Good to see you both. Bronwyn, we'll start with you. Despite the results that we've just said, the latest news poll, last week's Tasmanian election, why do you think the voters are not turning their backs on the major parties?
For the simple reason that we have compulsory preferential voting, which means at the end of the day, it'll either be the coalition or it will be Labor. And that's because of the allocation of preferences. Now, if you're in the United States, for instance, where you've got two dominant parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, you've now got a candidate in Robert Kennedy who is going to really skew the vote in America. They have a problem, just as they did when George Bush had Ross Perot running, cost him the election. So, but here, because of compulsory allocation of preferences, it will be either one of the major parties. Now, in the time I've been in the from the time I've been in the Parliament to now, there were 16 different small parties which rose up and collapsed. Everything from the Nuclear Disarmament Party to the Paul Darren Hinch Party. Now Jackie Lambie's gone in half because one's gone. We've had Mr Palmer and his party. They all rise up. Democrats were there for 25 years. Collapsed internally, Greens picked it up, and then Labor has tried to copy the Greens, and its vote goes down. You've got to be strong and stand for what your party is meant to stand for, and your people that you elect have to reflect that.
Okay, on the other end then, Tania, why do you think that voters are actually, in fact, turning away from the two major parties?
Well, I think the evidence is actually there when you look at the federal elections over the last 15 years. So let's look at the 2007 Rudd election. Labor won with 43.4%, and it's now polling at, what, 31, 32%. In fact, it won an election at 33%. Tony Abbott won in 2013 with 45.6% of the vote. Now, as you said rightly earlier, it's 37% that the Liberals are polling at. So the last federal election, 31.7% of people voted for either an independent or a minor party. So, and the last three federal elections, there hasn't been a landslide result, okay? In fact, it's been hard to predict elections at each time. And that tells you that people are unsure about how to vote, and they are moving away from the major political parties. And the evidence is in the Tasmanian state election as well, where almost 25% of people polled for a minor party or independent. At Queensland by-election, Ipswich West, 25% of people voted for two minor parties. So they are moving away. The evidence is there in the votes.
I mean, you make my point, Tania. You make my point. Well, when a party strays away from what it believes in, what its core business is, its vote goes down. But in each of those cases you've given, it was still either the Labor Party or the coalition. That's the way it ends up. In Queensland, the Labor Party in Queensland is so on the nose that it was bound to lose that seat. As for Tasmania, with its crazy Hare Clark system, they still won't know, probably for another week, who gets elected. And Canberra has the same problem in the ACT Council, or government, whatever you like to call it. So, at the end of the day, the major parties are still precisely that. But the problem they have to address is being true to their core beliefs.
Does it come down to policy as well, Bronwyn, that people are turning off? They're going, well, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party are not listening to me. They're not listening to my ideas. They're not putting a plan together for the future. We just had an immigration debate, and our jurors said exactly that.
Let's have a look at it. When Tony Abbott was the leader, you all knew what he stood for. You knew what the party stood for. He had a landslide. Malcolm Turnbull takes over. He's like, so much like the alternative, and he lost 14 seats.
Absolutely.
Peter Dutton's in there now for an opposition leader in his first term. His vote is doing this. And he's strong and he's purposeful and he'd make a good Prime Minister. So it's not a question of turning away. There's always room. Look, I'll name some of the parties we've had. As I said, I named a couple, but there's the Motor Enthusiast Party, the Australian Shooters Party, the Australian Christian Democrats, Call to Australia, Darren Hinch, Family First, Jackie Lamb.
None of this addresses why the polling has dropped for the major parties. It's still dropped, and it's dropped because of issues of trust.
But it comes
There's
back.
issues of disconnect. And you know Malcolm Turnbull, the Liberal Party elected him as leader, knowing all too well that he would be putting this Greens agenda in that made people really angry. And, of course, so many people I meet each day tell me, look, I vote for One Nation now. I used to vote for the Liberal Party, but I left because of Malcolm Turnbull. I mean, there are people that have moved away from the Liberal Party because the Liberal Party has spent way too long virtue signalling. They're almost on par with the Labor Party on a lot of issues when it comes to the Greens agenda. And you know this, Bronwyn.
But again, you're making my case. When people go away from their core business, their vote will drop. But at the end of the day, it's only a major party that will form government in the federal parliament.
They might form
and that's been the case since 1949.
In their primary votes, and that is a problem because it means that people are tired of the issues around trust. They're tired of politicians being disconnected from reality. Most of these politicians come in straight out of university, Labor club, Liberal club, straight out of the union ranks. They've never had a real job. And they walk in and they just follow a playbook when it comes to the major political parties. I spent 27 years in one, so I know. I've had more freedom than I've ever had under One Nation. I'll be able to speak my mind now as being part of the One Nation Party.
Well, look, you both have your say. We're running out of time, unfortunately. I'd love to keep going. I love listening to what you both say. But let's call on the jury. The question to our jurors, are voters turning their back on the major political parties? You have 10 seconds to deliberate.
I'm going to say no. Because I think they change. They go, but they come back.
Jury members, what have you decided? Okay, let's count. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of you say yes. The rest of you say no. So, in fact, you do believe that voters are turning their backs on the major political parties. Damien, why yes?
I actually think they're both right. You're right. If we look at the primary vote, we're seeing the numbers to the majors drop. We are seeing that. You actually said that. Bronwyn, you are correct because on the two-party preferred system at federal level, it's going to be Labor or Liberal. You're actually both right, but are the voters moving away? The answer has to be a yes.
What we've seen in the Tasmanian election, as we said. Agnes, what do you think?
I don't think so. I think Bronwyn's right. I think they wax and wane. When you stick to your core values, you absolutely vote for the major parties. Absolutely.
Bronwyn Bishop, Tania Mihailuk. Good to speak with you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, this courtroom is now adjourned. You have been watching The Jury. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next Sunday.